Hello, Mario. Hello, David. Of course, we've been working together for many years, and over the past couple of years, I'd say perhaps even more than that, we've been thinking about different, or you've been thinking about transition from your co-op in DC, perhaps somewhere else. We talked about Northern Virginia, perhaps somewhere in DC. I know you also explored some options outside of the continental USA. And I'll tell you again, we have many clients as I'm thinking about this who are either passively considering this or actually actively looking to essentially sell their house and go somewhere else. So I thought your experience would be helpful to many. But before we jump into that, if you don't mind, kind of sharing a little bit about yourself so our viewers know a bit more about you.
Sure, I'll start. I grew up in Virginia in a very historic town, Stanton. My earlier years were in architecture, and then I segued into real estate development and construction in about 1999.
Okay.
And I'm originally from West Texas, a longtime resident of Washington D.C., with a career on Capitol Hill, and later I formed my own government and public relations firm, and we have done and are doing a great deal of work in international trade, tourism, and general global issues. It's been very challenging, especially more so, but it gives me an opportunity to reach outside the borders of the United States. We've been in business since 1990.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Mario. And just for myself, I'll add again for those who are watching this, you're definitely one of the most interesting couples I've been working with over the past number of years. So I'll just add that here. Well, so kind of diving into all of this. So again, over the past couple of years, you've been, thinking about selling your co-op and moving somewhere else. So where are you at this point in your thinking? Again, as much as you're willing to share.
David, you want to take?
I'll start. I think we're still considering some options. We certainly appreciate your putting us in touch with Jan Brito. We talked about possibly leasing a house in St. Croix. We decided against that at the time, at least for now. We're still looking to sell the co-op and move to a more tax-friendly environment. Maybe that's Virginia. The caveat is Mario is a member of the Cosmos Club and is an active participant of that club. So he wants to be, and I want him to be nearby.
It's David's actually put his finger on my number one concern right now. How do I stay involved in the Cosmos Club, where I am very active as a member, and do so in a way that's not taxing with respect to travel times. With respect to where next, as David mentioned, we've thought about outside the borders of the United States. I, in particular, have also thought about Mexico as a possibility, given my family's background. And I take into consideration not only the economics of the day and at this point in our lives, but also the political situation, not only here, but globally and in any place where we may want to move. Finally, for me, I have come to the realization that this may be the big final move. When you're young, you never think about how many more moves. But when you get to be of a certain age, you realize that your lease on this plot of earth has its limitations. So that causes a lot of internal discussion that David and I have. And over the past 48 years, is it 48 or 49? Whatever it is one of those years. We've learned that prolonged discussions and research, and especially with input from professionals, be they attorneys or physicians, or very important to us, someone like you and your firm, um, is crucial to any decision that is made. Uh, and we're still in the exploratory process. David, what have you got?
I agree. We are.
Well, and Mario and David, again, thanks for sharing. And I'll just say you made some very good points. It actually gives us a lot to cover today, but I'll just kind of sum it up very quickly
Sure.
again for those who are listening. It's so important to not just think about like where you're moving, but in some sense, what is it that you would be giving up if you're moving out of your area? So if you're an active member of your community, like Cosmos Club as an example, or your country club as an example, if you move somewhere else, even if it's 10 15 miles away, perhaps not that long from that perspective, but that increases your commute and creates a lot of issues. So I'm glad you raised that point. Moving outside of the US, not to go too far, but we also have a number of clients. We actually have clients who decided to retire in Mexico City to be specific. They are liking it, but of course, even that comes with a number of challenges, I should say. So there's that. And like I really love that point when you said this is potentially going to be your final move. So you're seriously considering that because at any stage in your life, and perhaps specifically now, you wouldn't want to be moving 2, 3, 4 times in the future. So very important decision. And yes, it makes sense to have a good team behind you, which I know you do. But taking a quick step back here, because that's also another issue, but what kind of triggered this? Because I remember we talked about this again a year or two ago, and you're mentioning, assessments, expenses go up. So tell us a bit about that, like what triggered the
Um,
process.
for me, we live in a cooperative that we enjoy a great deal. Shoreham Cooperative Apartments, and the age group here of the apartment owners is much along our lines. But as we have lived here, we notice that there are some exits that take place uh, because everyone has a termination point, and that causes, at least in me, the need to think about, okay, it happened to them, it's going to happen to us. But that brings me to another point about relocation. Friends are important.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're just going to pick up and move to XYZ because it's tax friendly, well, have you looked at the friendly part? Where are your
Yeah.
friends? And I'm not necessarily talking about relatives, I'm talking about friends that are intellectually compatible, that are physically as active as you are. And the intellectual component, going back to the Cosmos Club, is very important to me because I'm not one that gets into playing golf or sitting back and sucking down beers and watching football. I require a lot of intellectual stimulation. David, what are your thoughts?
Um, well, I agree on the issue of assessments. When we moved into this building, it was quite affordable, much more affordable than having a home that had constant maintenance issues to deal with. Over time, it's still very affordable, but we've had assessments that we had not planned on, which have impacted our financial position. And I'm dubious going forward that we won't have those again. Maybe separated by a year, but I think that we can expect to see more uh, unanticipated
Yeah.
assessments by the building, and that's sort of troubling. And it's also very difficult to project your financial position years in advance if you don't even know what that assessment's going to be.
And while it's attractive, Alex, to think about moving into a condominium or an apartment where expenses are more fixed,
Yeah.
in this day and age, we're very fortunate that we have an extremely large apartment with a great deal of square
Hmm.
footage and high ceilings and beautifully located. The new developments that are coming about are much smaller. What is deemed a two-bedroom, two-bath apartment is secured within a square footage of less than 800 or 900 square feet.
Mentioned that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a challenge. What are you going to do with all your tchotchkes, or your things? And that brings in a whole different consideration. You get attached to a photograph, you get attached to a painting, whatever your parents gave you, and parting with those items. And David and I both have been through that with our parents who are now deceased. Believe it or not, those innate objects
Oh,
all
I
of a
get it.
sudden become alive, and they as I like to tell some of my our younger friends, I said, it's the old stuff that you think is useless. It becomes a ventriloquist for the past. It speaks to you,
I love
and
it.
you have to be very careful about what you give away.
Yeah, I mean, again, Mario, David, you're making so many great points, and I'll share this. I don't know, it's probably not the biggest secret, but we do a lot of financial analysis for our clients who are thinking about transitioning. I'll tell you this, not that I necessarily keep close track of it. The vast majority of people, they either stay where they are, or they just move within, like I said, 10 to 15 mile radius. I mean, like again, not going to be the biggest secret, but both DC and Maryland and Virginia to a certain degree, but certainly not as much. They're not your tax friendly places for retirees. They're just not. I mean, not like worse like New York City or California, but from that perspective, it's almost like you're better off almost anywhere else. But like you said, what about your friends? What about your community again? And then other things that, well,
Healthcare
out,
comes. Okay,
wow, talking about
I serve on the board of directors for a major hospital in Texas. So I have firsthand insights as to what healthcare costs, what it can and cannot do. Too many people just make the giant leap. For example, I've lived in Mexico City, I've studied in Mexico City. They have excellent hospitals, but are you going to be comfortable there with their system? So for me, that adds another log for me to chew on.
yeah, yeah. Well, but that's essentially that's that decision. I still find it to be, I would say, beneficial. And again, people are thinking about that, regardless. There's, seeing advertisements. And in your case, by the way, I do want to make this point again for those who are, watching or listening. With co-ops, there's that unique structure
Oh
where you
yeah.
essentially own shares of the building. You don't actually own like that piece of property. And you
Yes.
see, for you of course know this very well, but I'm not sure if most people understand that or understand the impact, more importantly, in the long run of how that works. Meaning, like, you have no choice. If the board decides to issue that assessment, well, you have to make
You
the
go on.
payments essentially. So
Yeah,
that's.
it's you make an excellent point. I currently serve as secretary of the board of the co-op, and I find that I'm taking on an educational role with respect to telling people the difference between a condo and a co-op,
Mhm.
and what that really means, and that you become a member. Depending on your relationship with people and how people friendly you are, or whatever, it can either be like camping out with your best buds or living with your mother-in-law. Not that I have anything against mother-in-laws, but it tends to be one or the other. It takes work. It's it becomes a family thing almost. Whereas a condo, it's your condo.
Oh, absolutely. Now, switching, I guess, gears a little bit here, and it sounds like, again, you're to the most part made up your mind on, how you want to transition or when. But when you're exploring your, rental options, were there any positives behind that decision? Perhaps that, sense of adventure? Have you thought about
Behind
that?
it, you mean as we looked around?
Yeah, yeah.
I tend to react intellectually, emotionally much faster than David does. David takes his time in analyzing and sort of studying the situation. I tend to have very quick uh, responses to what I'm seeing. But to back to your question, I'm not unlike a young kid when it sees a new shiny object. I go, oh wow, and then once I get past the wow part,
Yeah.
which is usually not long, then I start seeing all the what ifs, and there's some interesting places out there, but many are a great deal much smaller than what we now have, and much more expensive,
Yeah.
even as rental.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you know, when we were exchanging some emails, yeah, some of the numbers, I wasn't again totally surprised by them, but yeah, they
And
can
if you're going to sell, are you selling? You're in a buyer's market or a seller's market?
big difference.
Okay,
Yeah.
what is it? And the market's smart enough to know, when it's going to get you. Um, that's what David and I discuss a lot. And he he goes because of he's an architect by
Huh?
education
Is
and
you have
experience,
that
so he
background.
looks at things differently than I do. But it makes for a good combination that he has that structural knowledge that I don't have. I don't know, David. What do you think?
No, I think you hit some really good points. I agree. It does take all different types of uh, impressions and background. I agree.
Well, and that, by the way, you at least partially addressed my next question. I actually have it here. I mean, obviously, this decision to stay or move somewhere else will, well, goes without saying, impact both of you.
Right.
So, how the two of you discuss it? Because again, I'll just quickly share here, very quickly, very frequently when I work with my clients, one of the spouses wants to move, the other one is perfectly happy. It's not always like, oh wow, we're entirely on the same page. That is not always the case. So how do you have those conversations between the two
Well,
people?
I think as in any relationship, is that you have to learn how to read your audience. In this case, your spouse. And after 48 or 49 years, I think I'm a pretty good reader of where he's coming from. And which brings me to another important point, because we are a same-sex couple. We need to be very careful where we move to,
Oh, yeah.
because not everybody is going to be as understanding or seemingly as understanding as where we are now. For example, in this cooperative, there's absolutely no distinction made at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we've come to, I think, have sort of a leadership role in the cooperative,
Right.
where we've become the go-to people for information, whether it's insurance, whether it's vendors, or whatever it is. Uh, that's a nice community.
Yeah.
David, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. We have taken on some advisory roles here, and maybe because of our youth, since many of the residents are uh, a bit older than we are. But yes, I totally agree with what you say. You do have to read your audience, and you do have to be aware that uh, you can't dictate. I mean, if you're in a relationship, you certainly can't dictate that we're going to do this or that. It's a joint decision, and that's
Yeah.
sometimes difficult. I would also mention that in terms of getting rid of belongings, I
Mm-hmm.
have to remind myself that I'm not going to be on earth forever, and these things are just simply placeholders. Someone else can use them
Yeah.
after I've uh, long gone. So I don't want belongings to dictate what I end up doing next for housing.
As a matter of fact, on that point, we've have very specific instructions in our legal documents on
You know.
what's to be done with the artwork and the items of value. Uh, we don't have children, so there's nothing we can pass on to anyone. And that includes photographs, which David and I keep opening the closet doors and looking at them, going like, "Oh yeah, we got to get to these," and then we close the closet door again because it that's something you don't want to do. And there's a lot to moving at this
Oh yeah.
stage in
Oh
life.
yeah.
Okay, it's you just don't pick up and go whammy like you did when you were 25 or 30. It doesn't happen.
Well, and you mentioned that you're mentioning this point for the second time today, and again, I think it's such a good point because if you eventually decide to make this transition, and I mean it in the best possible way, you would most likely want it to be the final one.
Yes.
So you don't have to move again. Like when you say it, sometimes I'm trying to say this as gently as possible, but that makes perfect sense.
At this point in your life, you have be of the long vision. Whereas when you were younger, what vision? You lived by the day, the moment.
Just
Not
go.
anymore.
Just go. Well, and that's talking about practical considerations. Again, the three of us touched on that too. And I'll just say again for those who are watching or listening, before you make a decision like that, if you decide to sell, rent, or move somewhere else, well, how about you do a short or intermediate term rental somewhere else, if your budget, of course, allows for that. So, talking about our client base, many actually are thinking about North Carolina for a variety of
Right.
reasons.
Everybody's going there. Okay.
Well, it's not no longer Florida. I'll share that.
Right.
But my suggestion is pretty much always the same. That's great when you visited there for a week or so. But what if you stay there for a few months, for several months? Will you really like your neighbors? I mean, it was fun to say hello to them when you were there for a week, or so. But will you actually enjoy interacting with them in this very frequently it's like a golf community or something like that on an everyday basis? And in many cases the answer is positive. I went there, lived there for 3 months, I love it, that's it. But I can imagine how in some situations it's like it's very different.
You also have to think, at least this crosses my mind from time to time. What is going to be out there that will appeal to my educational and food palate?
Yeah.
Okay, the thought of moving into a community that doesn't offer a variety of food choices where I can go out and have different meals or features healthy food like we can get around here. Not that the rest
Yeah.
of the country is unhealthy, but I I'm very concerned about how we treat our bodies. Uh, and again, being on the hospital board, I'm a little more sensitive perhaps than most. Uh, I know David and I will look at labels and shop for products that are not only environmentally friendly but body friendly. And it gets more complicated the older you get. David, I don't
I
know, what do you think?
You've hit upon some good points. Yes, I totally agree with everything you just said.
See, that's part of the magic of 48 years. Okay,
Yes,
you know which
You're
way
already
that
on the
yeah,
same
you know
page.
which way the song should go. Okay.
Yeah, but and again, you're making excellent points. I mean, again, I'm trying to say it as gently as possible, but here in the DMV area, it's almost like we're spoiled to a degree. We have
We are.
access to everything. Like again, how far you want to go, but we have access to three national or multinational, international, I should say, airports.
Right.
You can go anywhere pretty much in the world if you live in the Washington, D.C. area. Back to North Carolina, well, I just happen to know that Charlotte is one of the major hubs, but if you live like 3 hours away from it, that
sure.
complicates your, international travel goals if you have them on your bucket list. So there's that component too.
There's another point that you've indirectly alluded to, and that is the population demographics. Is it all old? Is it a mixture?
Yeah.
Because I thrive on having mentees in high school and university, and from Sometimes I've been asked to teach a course at American University, and I find that as a former school teacher in Texas, I like the challenge of a young mind who's allowing me to peek into his or her world.
Mhm.
So I am enriched in that way. So if I move to some other place, are there similar opportunities? I don't want to go gather with a bunch of aging angels.
I I hear
That's a
you.
little blunt, but that's just the way I am.
I hear you. See, I'll just add from myself, and again, I keep trying to make it as gentle as possible. There are at least two types of retirees. I'll put it this way, or people who enjoy their retirement. There are those who prefer to take that passive approach. Right? They play golf, they travel, they go to the beach, and they love it. And there's some, and I would probably put you in that category. They're as engaged as they used to be in their full-time working years, but perhaps in a different way.
Yeah.
Like on the board, they continue to write papers and present. I mean, we have clients like that. They're as engaged as they used to be, to the most part. They're just not necessarily like doing it for money. So yeah,
I
and that makes a difference.
as David can tell you, I have not slowed down at all. I'm up and about around 4:30 in the morning, and we have breakfast. We're one of those weird people that have early breakfast. And then I also write for some newspapers, so I get my column out. Then I have the cooperatives business that I tend to. And then I am the head of several program initiatives at the Cosmos Club, so I take care of that. And then I got the mentees that I, ping early in the morning. Did you do this? Did you do that? So I'm busy.
Oh, yeah. What about you, David?
Oh
What does
my,
your
I don't think I can keep
schedule look
up.
like?
I will say by noon, he's very tired.
I
Um,
can imagine that too.
yes.
But
Yeah.
I also enjoy, we enjoy different sports. I enjoy more solitary sports like bicycling. I
Hmm.
like to go out to the trails that are nearby by myself to clear my mind. And I find that it recharges me. And so I have to look at things like that wherever we go next. You're certainly not going to go bicycling down Paseo de la Reforma in Mexico City unless you want to have your life taken away. But you have to be careful. But anyway,
Well, and to kind of, guess, finish this up, and I like to ask this question, if you could turn the time back 10 years, let's say, or 15 years, 20 years, or any other time that you prefer, given everything you know today about your living situation, potential transition, would you do anything differently? And perhaps as part of the same question, what would be your advice again to those of our clients or to simply those people who are, you know, watching this in terms of the steps they should take to perhaps prepare themselves for a transition like this?
I think, Alex, we would have moved into an apartment, a co-op, or a condo earlier. I think we would have invested with a financial planner earlier. Um, I think we would have adjusted some of our investments
Mhm.
that we were managing on our own much differently than we did. Um, it comes to mind that some of our IRAs were in index funds, which were something that we really couldn't control
Mhm.
because they were company selected, but they weren't helpful. They weren't beneficial to us long term.
uh,
Yeah. No.
with respect to me, it's pretty easy, and I think it's obvious because of the relationship I have with you and how I enjoy referring clients to you. Whether you enjoy those
Appreciate
clients or
it.
not, I don't know. But
I do, and
okay,
I appreciate
but
it. Yes.
if I had to do anything different at all, I would have found an Alex much, 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 much earlier.
Well, you're making me blush here. I don't know if people can see it. I don't know about the, you
That's the
know,
truth. I mean, I don't have any velvet on my tongue. I'm just telling you what I know.
well, I appreciate it. This is, by the way, not meant to be any kind of I don't know, solicitation for a new business or anything else, but I will say this, that many potential mistakes that people make, specifically at this stage in their life, and I'm just going to make a general observation, in many cases, yes, they could have been easily prevented if you work with a professional. By any means, doesn't have to be our firm. There are a lot of great professionals in our area. But I will say this: you also need to do your due diligence on
Oh
that too.
yeah,
Sure.
So
yeah. We have found when before we became formally engaged with you that there's a lot of baiting and switching in the industry that we were not. Only research exposed that, and based on our relationship with our former CPA and how we came to know you, we felt comfortable in trusting you because I think that's part of the mystery of all of this is who do you trust?
such a good point.
You know,
Such
uh,
a good point. I mean,
and
with
and it comes to one final thing for me about who do I trust. You have to trust that internal GPS you were born with, your intuition.
yeah,
What is it telling you?
yeah.
Anyway, that's it for me.
Well, this is great. Actually, learned a couple of things. I usually do in conversations like this. Again, I appreciate you finding some time to share your thoughts, and I certainly hope for those again who are listening, this was helpful. Is there any feedback that any of you want to provide? Absolutely. I always enjoy hearing from our viewers, newsletter readers. So yeah,
Well, I hope
thanks
this has been helpful,
much.
David.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so. Thank you, Alex.